The Philadelphia Eagles may have gotten down to their initial 53-man roster today, but there are still ways they can improve this team. I'll tell you how coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the show. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner, almost 1 week away. Visit the FanDuel app today. Start planning your future bets now. Eagles general manager Howie Roseman, he was planning his future and current 53-man roster today. He had until 4 p.m. to get this roster down to its initial 53. Now, like Howie said in his press conference today, they're not done. They're going to make moves. I would predict they add players on both sides of the ball still before next Thursday's season opener against the Dallas Cowboys at Lincoln Financial Field. But for now, the Eagles today did get down to their 53-man roster, and they didn't do anything super crazy or unexpected. I think there were some positions that he went heavier at on offense or defense, or lighter at than I imagined. There were a few surprise cuts, like I would say wide receiver Anais Smith, but overall, like nothing too shocking about what happened today. And I think on paper, this Eagles roster looks like the most complete team in the entire NFL. And yes, zoomed in, we talk a lot about the issues that are still there at the third cornerback spot, at safety with the injuries to, Drew Makuba and Sidney Brown. We still talk about the depth of the edge rusher position. But overall, when you zoom out and you look at the Eagles 53-man roster today, you look at their problems compared to not like the bad teams in the NFL, but the other contenders like the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens, the Buffalo Bills, the Detroit Lions. Those teams that are also Super Bowl favorites, I think their problems are more serious than Philadelphia. So I always like to put that in perspective when the Eagles, announce their initial roster. I think, things look pretty good on paper on both sides of the football. But when you look at who was released today, who is available on waivers, who will eventually be in the free agent pool, I think there are some obvious upgrades the Eagles can still make to this football team. And I think when you look on the defensive side of the ball, like that's where moves are going to come. Because again, I think there are definitely some question marks about Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche on the edge, and Agbo Okunrakwo, who was the fifth edge, kept today over Antoine Powell-Ryland Jr., and Patrick Johnson. I think there's question marks there. As we all know, Vic Fangio is not feeling great about that third cornerback spot with Keely Ringo, Adoree Jackson, and Jacorian Bennett. Although Howie Roseman today mentioned Keely Ringo still by name as the player that they're excited about still at that spot. Did not mention Adoree Jackson or Jacorian Bennett. So maybe Howie's still banking on Ringo being that guy. We'll see what happens. Overall, at safety too, there's still some question marks about the health of that position. There are players out there that Howie Roseman can add to upgrade this roster. And of course, the obvious ones that have been thrown out there, like, Justin Simmons at safety. People have discussed the idea of signing cornerbacks like Asante Samuel Jr., but that's pretty much out the window now because we all know after today's report, his neck injury is going to keep him out until at least the second half of the season. He likely will not play till 2026. Rasul Douglas signed today by the Miami Dolphins. So those were the obvious things that could happen. I don't think because players were signed and because I think they're okay at those spots, I don't think those are the moves that are coming. For me, if I had to say there's 3 defensive players I'm watching in free agency that I think the Eagles should add, I'm really looking at edge. I'm looking at somebody like Za'Darius Smith. I'm looking at some linebacker depth, some versatile depth on the second level of the defense. Isaiah Simmons, the former 8th overall pick out of Clemson, was released today by the Green Bay Packers. Marcus Epps, the Eagles starting safety of that 2022 Super Bowl run, he did agree to part ways today with the New England Patriots, both sides looking for a clean slate. Those are some of the players that I would add, not the obvious names at corner we've mentioned, and at safety or, trading for Trey Hendrickson, which we know now is not going to happen as he signed a new 1-year deal. Those are some of the options that I really like in it, and they make more sense for what Howie Roseman normally does from a roster building perspective around this time of year. Those moves make a lot of sense. Za'Darius Smith, I'm honestly surprised that we haven't heard the Eagles attached to him more. And maybe they are interested and we just haven't heard it. We know today that there was a report out that Smith is mulling over multiple options. Maybe it is between the Eagles and other contenders like the Detroit Lions, who had him down the stretch in the 2024 playoff run. But if they're not interested, I think they should be. He makes a lot of sense. I think he's an upgrade at that third or fourth edge spot. I think he's an upgrade over what they have in Ojulari and in Uche. He had 9 sacks last year combined with the Cleveland Browns and the Detroit Lions. And what I like about Za'Darius Smith, he's a bigger edge rusher, which I want rotating in with Jalen Hunt and Nolan Smith, who are skinnier, lighter, more undersized, like stand-up edge rushers that are more of like an outside linebacker tweener, right? They're not the traditional 4-3 hand-in-the-dirt defensive ends like a Za'Darius Smith is, kind of like Josh Sweat was. With Josh Sweat in Arizona now, I kind of do want that type of edge rusher in this rotation, because one thing I'm a little bit concerned about with the edge depth is not that they can get to the quarterback. Because even Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche have proven to a degree that they can get to the quarterback pretty consistently. Like, that is their bread and butter. That's their strength. But I'm looking at run defense. And Nolan Smith is a really good run defender. Jalen Hunt is an underrated run defender, but they are a little light on the outside. I would like to get a bigger, again, more traditional 4-3 defensive end that's good at run defense like Josh Sweat was and Brandon Graham last year. Those were more classic 4-3 ends that were very underrated in what they did against the run on the edge. That's why I'm looking at Za'Darius Smith, and I'm kind of surprised that people haven't suggested his name more. Now, of course, they're going to give Ojulari and Uche a chance to be those guys as the number 3 and 4 behind Smith and Hunt, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles do bring in somebody like Za'Darius Smith or a veteran with experience. I don't want Jadeveon Clowney, but he's out there, and Matthew Judon, I believe, has not been signed yet. Preston Smith. These are guys that are definitely aging, but I think they're players that could upgrade what they currently have behind Hunt and Smith. So I'm looking at Za'Darius Smith. Isaiah Simmons, the Eagles really don't need linebacker depth. I think they have 4 really good players there right now. Nakobe Dean plays on the PUP. He'll be back, he said today, likely by week 5, although I don't know if there's a starting job that's going to be left for him. But I digress. Isaiah Simmons, though, might be interesting if you want to go a little bit heavier at linebacker. As an 8th overall pick, I mean, I was so wrong about Simmons coming out of college. I thought he was going to be this like all-time great Swiss Army knife, and he just wasn't able to become that, or even a quality starting linebacker, safety, dime hybrid player, whatever you imagine him to be coming out of Clemson. Like, he has not been that. Just got released yet again by another team in Green Bay. But why I'm interested about Simmons isn't really about the fit with the position, like the need, that's not really there. But his skill set, that versatility, that ability to pass rush, that athleticism where he normally should be able to cover and also be good against the run, he hasn't put it all together. But Vic Fangio's strength is at this position. I think he's best at getting the most out of linebackers, especially of the style of Isaiah Simmons, who I think is a similar player, again, style-wise, not production-wise, to Zach Baun and Jahad Campbell. So if you want to keep a 5th linebacker right now, instead of like, I'm sorry, but Ben Van Sumeren on this roster as a fullback, I just don't think they're, really doing something smart with that spot. I think it's kind of a waste of a spot on the 53. When you have the best offensive line in football, the best running back in football, a top 3 rushing quarterback, there really isn't a need for a fullback. Like, the fullback isn't really elevating or changing much about this run offense. So, in my opinion, I'd probably cut somebody like BVS while Nakobe Dean's on the PUP, kick the tires on Isaiah Simmons, see if Vic Fangio can get anything out of him. If he can't, then it's a lost cause. But maybe this is just me being stubborn about my guys from the draft, because this guy hasn't worked with Arizona, with New York, with Green Bay. It just hasn't come to fruition. But for me, I am curious about Fangio's ability to turn guys around, especially of this style of play at this position. So I'm interested in him. And then Marcus Epps, if you're a little bit nervous about the safety depth, if you want to upgrade that 4th spot where Tristan McCullum currently is, like, the Eagles know that Marcus Epps, and it was definitely a career year. 2022 is more of an anomaly for who Epps is. With the Raiders, he wasn't spectacular, but as a 4th safety, the Eagles know that Epps could be a starter on a Super Bowl defense. So if he's your 4th guy, Makuba's banged up. He's been injured multiple times this summer. So is Sidney Brown. They might want a familiar face in the backfield. So I look at defense, and I think I would predict that's where the moves come. And again, like obviously Justin Simmons' name is always tossed out there. I've thrown out those corner names a lot, Asante, Razul. Neither of those are options anymore. Like Greg Newsome, which is still something of interest to keep an eye out for. But I think I'm looking at like edge rusher, Za'Darius Smith. I kind of like the idea of linebacker with Isaiah Simmons. And then if you're going to add a safety, I would add Marcus Epps, because if you bring in Justin Simmons, like he's the starter. And then Makuba and Sidney Brown have to battle for a rotating role as a third safety. So Epps kind of gives you the flexibility of giving Makuba and Brown the opportunity to win those jobs, to be the guys this regular season, to play into those roles. And if they're not, well, at least you know when Marcus Epps is a fourth safety, like you have a certain floor there. So that's why I'm interested in him as well. But there are some guys on offense too. I think at wide receiver, they did not keep Anaya Smith today, so they're only going with 5 right now. I think there are some players at wide receiver that were released today that could fill multiple roles for this football team. I'll tell you who they are coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th, today is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or you're ready to crown your Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia, before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. Bet on Jalen Hurts. Come on. Bet on Saquon Barkley to be the first non-quarterback to win MVP since, was it Adrian Peterson back in 2012? Crown your champ. Bet on the Eagles in August to win the championship. Or you can parlay your division winner dark horses. For me, it's the Atlanta Falcons. I'm looking at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Maybe even a team like the Chicago Bears in the NFC North. Visit the FanDuel app today. Start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only, and it's today. FanDuel, play your game. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, we do have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you, the listener. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everybody who completes a survey, you're going to be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for helping out the show and helping out the network. And it was a busy day at the network today. The entire NFL had to get down to 53 players by 4 p.m. Eastern time, so it felt like every 2 seconds you're refreshing X. I still want to say Twitter. I'm going to say Twitter. You keep refreshing Twitter, and this player got released. This player got waived. The Packers traded for this guy. The Bears traded away this player. I mean, it was a crazy day for NFL news. I was glued to my phone all day long. And like I said, the Eagles' initial 53, it looks good. It looks like the best roster in football. But I do think there are ways to upgrade this 53. Like on defense, 3 players that I would add that are available right now in free agency: Za'Darius Smith, Isaiah Simmons, Marcus Epps. All interesting players in my opinion. Another guy I didn't mention on defense that he's a my guy from this year that I would really be interested in. If you want to bring in another cornerback for cheap, Kobe Bryant out of Kansas. I know there's a lot of you out there that like this kid as well with the Jays last year. He got waived by the Falcons. Obviously didn't have a great summer, but I'm really interested in his skill set. I personally would take him over Mac McWilliams as that number 6 corner. I don't think the Eagles will be interested, but Kobe Bryant's out there too. There were a lot of draft my guys for me that got released today, so I don't know if that says something about me as a scout, but Kobe Bryant's another player that I personally think would upgrade the bottom half of this cornerback depth chart. On offense, the offense is pretty much set. I'm very happy with how that unit looks on paper. Little to no questions, but I will say Anaya Smith was waived. So the Eagles are only carrying 5 receivers currently. It's A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, you've got Jahan Dotson, you traded for John Mechie, he's your number 4, Johnny Wilson out for the year, so he's on IR. Darius Cooper made the team, which is an awesome story. An undrafted kid from such a small school comes in, completely balls out, and earns a roster spot. Was one of your most consistent players in all of training camp, regardless of position. It's awesome to see him make the team as a fifth guy. But the Eagles do normally keep 6. And maybe they won't because they did want to go heavier at defensive tackle where they kept 6 players. Normally they don't go that heavy. They kept 5 edge rushers as well. They went a little bit heavier at cornerback, on the offensive line too. So maybe they just will keep 5 receivers, and Ainias Smith will be that number 6 guy on the practice squad that can be a call-up throughout the year. But if they do keep a 6th, which they do sometimes, for me, there were a bunch of guys that got released today that I think are upgrades over Ainias Smith, and they can become returners. Like, these are punt and kick returners too. If you don't want Cooper DeJean returning punts this year, which I absolutely do not, especially when you look at the third cornerback instability, DeJean is so important to this defense. And you talk about, I mentioned earlier, like if there are some concerns about the edge run defense, Cooper DeJean is really important in that way as well in the slot. I want to keep him healthy. He's a good punt returner, but I think they should try to put somebody else there. Will Shipley could be an interesting option at running back, but there are 3 receivers that got released today that I think could be upgrades over Ainias Smith that I would want for that spot. I'm looking at 3 guys specifically. KJ Hamler, who was waived today by the Buffalo Bills, DeAndre Carter, who was released by the Cleveland Browns, and then Mecole Hardman from the Green Bay Packers. All guys you probably know. KJ Hamler was a second-round pick in 2020. Unfortunately, again, he was the receiver I wanted the Eagles to take in the first round that year. And yeah, not Justin Jefferson, not Jalen Reagor, not Brandon Ayuk. I wanted KJ Hamler. He's not that guy, hasn't become that guy, couldn't even make the Bills roster. But for me, as wide receiver 6 with return ability, I'm very interested in KJ Hamler. I think Mecole Hardman, a former second-round pick who was released by the Green Bay Packers, has shown he's a good punt returner, has made plays in that Kansas City Chiefs offense, including the game-winning catch in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. You look at DeAndre Carter. He's a former Eagle that's had a pretty good career as a return specialist. And all 3 of those players make sense for what Howie Roseman likes because he normally loves to take chances on day 1, early day 2 picks for cheap, like first, second-round picks that haven't panned out with other teams that you can get for pennies on the dollar. He loves to go after those guys, so Hamler and Hardman check that box. But he also likes a good reunion. And DeAndre Carter was a former Eagle, and he's kind of like one of those preseason heroes that got away, that the Eagles cut and ended up having a pretty good career for himself as a good returner with Houston. I believe he was in Cincinnati as well, and then Cleveland. So if the Eagles want to keep a 6th receiver, I think those 3 guys would be upgrades over what they had in Ainias Smith. Now, there was a 4th receiver I didn't put on that graphic that I'm interested in, but I'm also not because there were reports about his immaturity last year as a rookie, him not wanting to embrace being a special teamer because he thought he deserved to be a starter, even though he was not good enough. But I will say, coming out of the 2024 draft, he had a really interesting skill set as like almost a poor man's Deebo Samuel, as a run after the catch gadget receiver that the Jets were hell-bent on trading up for on day 2. It's Malachi Corley, who the Jets did release today. Again, I'm concerned about the character issues, but he checks some boxes. He's that kind of gadget rack player that I kind of am interested in adding to this offense. I think Corley would also have some return ability like Hamler, Carter, and Hardman. And when you look at the Eagles' culture, I think they can afford to take chances on somebody like this. I think with how selfless and win-oriented this locker room is, I think Corley could come in as a young player and kind of reform who he is and his reputation, because he wasn't really able to come back from that in New York last year. So, those issues kind of cooled me off on the idea of Corley today. Like when they initially released him, I'm like, oh, go get him. Like that's a Howie Roseman move. Then reading reports from SNY, I'm like, I'm not so sure. But like this culture, like as long as it's not a Orlando Scandrick type of snake trying to start problems with this football team, I think they can handle it. And he has an interesting skill set for a 6th receiver, 5A, 5B. I wouldn't be mad if they brought in Corley. So I think at wide receiver, that's what I'm looking at on offense, if they're going to add anybody before next Thursday. At tight end, there's an interesting player too. So Kylen Granson did beat out EJ Jenkins. He's tight end 3 as of now. But the Colts did release Jelani Woods, 6'7", giant frame, red zone weapon. again, not a great separator, not great hands. There's a reason all these players got released today. But Johnny Wilson got hurt. If you kind of wanted to add that giant basketball frame, red zone specialist, contested catch guy, maybe you do take him over a Kylen Granson. If you want to add a little bit more size to that tight end room in case, when Dallas Goedert goes down inevitably, you do have some more size and another body in there with Grant Calcaterra. Jelani Woods, the player that I liked coming out of the draft that might be of interest. So there's a lot of pass catchers that maybe the Eagles would be interested in bringing into the fold, but I don't know. I think they kind of want to go heavier at some of these other spots. So maybe they do just go with 5 receivers, and then Ainias Smith is like that 6th call-up on the practice squad. But I want to get Cooper DeJean off the punt return spot, and there's a lot of receivers that got released today that I think could replace him. Britton Covey got released too from the Rams. So if you want to bring back your old punt returner, Covey is available as well. All right, guys, we'll wrap up today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, 3 key takeaways from the Eagles' initial 53-man roster. We'll get into that coming up next. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy Football. The NFL season is right around the corner. It's 9 days away at this point? You can feel the buzz. Fantasy football season is here. Everyone's researching, drafting, and building their championship squads. If you haven't joined a league yet, now's the time, and it's all happening on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, I'm playing football fantasy on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too. Whether you're a first-timer or a veteran creating your millionth league, I'm in a ton of leagues. I've been in one league on Yahoo since 2009. Yahoo Fantasy is loaded with fun ways to compete, brand new features that make the game even better. With the season kickoff on September 4th, now's the time to start playing on Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers so many fun ways to compete, like guillotine leagues. You can play in head-to-heads, private, public, you name it. The NFL season kickoffs is September 4th, so don't wait. Start your league now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, Eagles fans, the Philadelphia Eagles' initial 53-man roster was set today. Not in stone, though, but we pretty much know, for the most part, what this roster is going to look like next Thursday night in the opener against the Dallas Cowboys. 3 key takeaways from Howie's decisions today, and not, again, who they could add, as I talked about earlier. I think, as I said in segment 1 and segment 2, this roster is really good. It's the best in football. I do think there's ways to improve it. I think there are guys you can add at wide receiver. I think there are some interesting options on the edge, maybe at safety. I don't think corner anymore is something I would pursue right now because the 2 guys I wanted, Asante Samuel Jr., we got an update today on his neck injury. He's likely not going to play at least till the second half of the year. I don't think at that point an NFL team will be interested in bringing him in. I think he's going to need a whole offseason to get back into form, kind of like A.J. Dillon this past year. And then Rasul Douglas, who the Eagles should have been in on. Maybe they were. Doubt it. The Miami Dolphins brought him in. He's going to be a starting corner for them. So unless it's like you trade for a guy I'm not even thinking of, like, man, could they get Reek Woolen? I don't know why Seattle would do that, but I mean, like, that's my dream. Unless they do something like that, I'm focused more on edge, safety, maybe linebacker. I really like the idea of Isaiah Simmons. And then on offense, I'm interested in receiver. But for what they did today, my big takeaways, number 1, 7 of 10 draft picks made it from the 2025 class. The only ones that didn't were Kyle McCord and then Antoine Powell-Ryland Jr. Miles Hinton, who I thought was going to make the team, got placed on short-term IR. I do wonder if this is that phantom let's make up an injury to stash him away kind of move. I thought that was going to be Cameron Williams, but Cameron Williams did make the team. Miles Hinton placed on IR. I thought he had a really good summer, though, so I'm glad, at least as of right now, he's still in-house. I do like that Cameron Williams was chosen. The long-term development of Cam was the priority over keeping somebody like Kendall Lamb, who does have starting experience and a lot of it. But he wasn't great this preseason. Cameron Williams has a really high ceiling with Jeff Stoutland working with him. I'm glad they went with that. I'm glad overall that Howie prioritized a lot of young players, and he chose the long-term instead of the short-term with some of these decisions. 7 of 10 draft picks making it. Like, that shows you, again, the continuous evolution of Howie as a drafting GM. Like, that was the final stage for him to become, I think he already was an all-time great GM, but how good he's been drafting since 2020, 2021, that has made him potentially the GOAT. Like, you could make an argument at some point that Howie Roseman is the greatest GM of all time. And the one bugaboo he had was that he just had some brutal draft classes. But now, like, look at this roster. The vast majority of it are players that were taken in this era. And 7 of 10 picks from this year made it. I think Antoine Powell-Ryland Jr. will be on the practice squad. So too will be Kyle McCord. Drew Kendall made it. Mac McWilliams, Smile Mondin. Ty Robinson was great in the preseason. And then you got Darius Cooper, a UDFA, makes it. I mean, it's awesome. I was really impressed with this year's draft class. 7 of 10 made it. Hinton was stashed away on IR, so you've got 8 of the 10. And then I think 2 of them will be on the practice squad. Another big takeaway, Ogbo Okunrakwo over Antoine Powell-Ryland and Patrick Johnson as that final 5th edge rusher. I think that was the right call. So with the edge questions they have, with, again, not knowing what kind of step Jalen Hunt will take this year, if it'll be big enough to be the number 2 in this rotation, not knowing what you're going to get from Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche, I know I just said that I like that they took like Cam Williams over Kendall Lamb, that they went with the long-term upside development of a player they drafted over the short-term veteran that's, has some experience. But at edge, I kind of wanted the opposite approach, and that's what they did with Ogbo Okunrakwo over Antoine Powell-Ryland Jr. specifically. I like that they went with the higher floor, the player that has proven production. Okunrakwo in the last 3 years has at least 3 sacks, 3 to 5. He's had an underrated summer as well in his own right. Like, I think he had a good camp. He had a good preseason. I like that that's the move they went with, because if Ojulari and or Uche don't pan out, at least with Okunrakwo, okay, there's another option that he's a proven option. Between those 3 guys now, you would imagine at least one becomes a solid rotational pass rusher. So I like that they made that move, and I also think you can get APR on the practice squad. I can't imagine a team's going to claim him. And same with Patrick Johnson. Patrick Johnson, I feel bad. Like, he had a great preseason, was probably their most consistent pass rusher, but Okunrakwo has the production behind, opposite Myles Garrett in Cleveland, and I think he's had a good summer. So I actually think they made the right call with that approach as their 5th edge. And then for me, my third takeaway are the guys. My third thing I'm focused on, the players that I want to bring into the practice squad. Make sure they get these 3 players onto the PS for development. It's tackle Holland Pierce, it's running back Montrell Johnson, and the defensive tackle Jacob Sykes. Holland Pierce, again, you guys have heard me talk about him a lot on the show, 6'8", over 320 pounds. They had him cross-training at guard. I want Stoutland to be able to continue to develop his skill set, as well as Cameron Williams and Miles Hinton and Drew Kendall. I like that they have 4 rookie linemen in-house right now that they can work with. The NFL does like big bodies at tackle. I do wonder if another team would be interested in kind of stealing him. But for me, like, those are the 3 guys I really want on the practice squad. Holland Pierce, Montrell Johnson can play. I'm telling you. A.J. Dillon and Shipley had a great summer, so there was no way Johnson was going to make this team. The Eagles do not keep 4 running backs anymore, but he can play, and injuries kind of held him back. He's shown in the preseason he's got some explosive ability. I hope they get him on the practice squad, because if there was an injury to Saquon, Montrell Johnson, I think, could be like a better version of what you had in Josh Adams in 2018 as like a UDFA rookie that could actually produce in this backfield behind that offensive line. And then Jacob Sykes, a defensive tackle, I was really impressed with his tape. I think he has some legit traits, but you kept 6 defensive tackles. He was not going to be one of those players. Ty Robinson had a great summer. So did Gabe Hall. So did Byron Young. It was a numbers game, but Sykes had a good summer. I don't think he missed the roster because of anything he did. I'd like to stash those 3 especially. Like, they'll be able to bring in and keep a lot of these guys that they cut today. But the 3 I want to make sure are on the practice squad that I'm most interested in their long-term development: Holland Pierce, Montrell Johnson, and then Jacob Sykes. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for tuning in, making us your first listen each and every day. Make sure as well, your second listen is the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get ready for your fantasy season with a show 5 days a week right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.